Hello and welcome back to another episode of Healing Our Earth Through Compassion. Today's guest is Dr. Kristin Neff, Associate Professor at the University of Texas in Austin. She's pioneered the research of self-compassion and is the author of several books. Welcome, Kristin, and thanks for being with us.
Oh, thank you, Randolph. I'm so glad you're doing this series. It's wonderful.
I appreciate that. Can we start off by perhaps you just introducing yourself to our listeners and tell us something about your life or your work?
Sure, yes. So, well, my son likes to call me the self-compassion lady.
Nice.
That's basically how I spend most of my time. So I research self-compassion. I teach self-compassion. I write books about self-compassion. So, and that's more my professional life. In my personal life, I live in Austin, Texas with my son, Rowan, who is going to Westlake High School. And yeah, so it's just me and him, and we live a pretty quiet life, especially now with COVID. I used to travel a lot, and now we're just home when we go for walks. And yeah, it's very peaceful these days, even though it's very stressful at the same time and sad, but it's also peaceful.
Yeah. There's a lot going on.
A lot going on, yeah.
Well, listen, as you said, you've been working in the space of self-compassion for years, and so I wonder if we could start off with you just giving us maybe a brief definition of what self-compassion is, and also, is there a distinction between compassion in general with self-compassion?
Yeah, so actually maybe I'll answer the second question first, which is, from my point of view, there's not a distinction between compassion for others and compassion for self, other than, we more readily give compassion to others, and we don't tend to turn the lens of compassion inward. But if you think about what compassion for others entails, it's really the same with self-compassion. So if I'm going to have compassion for someone, the first thing I need to do is notice that they're in pain, right? If I just walk straight by that homeless person on the street and I don't take in the fact that here's another human being who's suffering, I can't have compassion for them, right? And that's the same thing with ourselves. We need to be aware that we're suffering in some way. And I use the term mindfulness to refer to that awareness. In other words, we need to be mindful of the fact that we're in pain, or that we're feeling hurt in some way, or we're stressed, or we're afraid, whatever it is we're feeling. And the reason I think it's important to think about mindful awareness as opposed to just awareness is, and this is kind of where compassion and self-compassion are related. In many ways, what happens with self-compassion is we're treating ourselves like we would normally treat someone else, right? How we treat a friend or someone we cared about or someone who's in pain. And so when we turn the lens of compassion inward, it means we kind of have to step outside of ourselves, get a little distance from ourselves in order to turn back inward and say, wow, you're really struggling. Do you need some help right now? And so, in other words, the type of awareness that's in compassion is balance. It has some perspective. It has some space built into it. If you're just lost in your pain, completely consumed by it, then you have no space from which to give yourself compassion. So we need to be aware of what's going on. We can't avoid it or suppress it or pretend it's not there, but also we can't be fused with it. We need some space, and that's provided by mindfulness. And then, of course, in order for it to be a compassionate response, again, whether it's to that homeless person on the street or to ourselves, we need to have a response of kindness, right? I mean, sometimes we're very judgmental. We may know someone's in pain, or we may see ourselves in pain, but our first reaction may be just to judge ourselves. It's our fault, or, something's wrong with us. And in order for it to be a compassionate response, what it means is that we're kinder, right? There's a sense of kindness. We're understanding, right? We're supportive. And in fact, in the science literature, compassion is often defined as a motivation. It's the motivation to alleviate suffering, right? And so just as with compassion for others, there's some desire to help, there's concern, is there anything I can do? Yeah. Same with ourselves. It's really the motivation to help ourselves in some way, to care for ourselves. Yeah. And then finally, a really important factor that distinguishes compassion from pity, again, whether that's pity for someone else or self-pity, is a sense of connectedness, right? So Randolph, you'd probably like it if I was feeling compassionate toward you about some struggle you had, but you probably wouldn't like it if I pitied you, right?
Yeah, there's
Why
a very
would-
different feel to that. Yeah.
Yeah, because if I pitied you, that would mean I felt separate from you. I was kind of looking down on you.
Mm.
Whereas if I have compassion for you, it's like, hey, I've been there. We've all been there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So the difference between compassion and pity is a sense of interconnectedness.
Mm.
So self-pity is actually not a very healthy state of mind. You know, self-pity is poor me, woe is me. We're very kind of self-focused. We feel very isolated from other people. It's not actually a healthy mindset.
Mm.
Compassion, by definition, even if you look at the Latin, passion means to suffer, come means with. You know, part of the definition of compassion is the shared nature of
Mm.
suffering.
Mm.
So with self-compassion, what that means is we just remember really the truth that everyone is imperfect and everyone leads an imperfect life. And it may seem obvious, and yet we often forget when we make a mistake or we fail at something or something very difficult happens in our life. Maybe we get some health diagnosis. We irrationally feel as if something has gone wrong,
Right.
right? As if what's supposed to be happening is perfection. And if perfection isn't happening, something has gone wrong. And that makes us feel abnormal, and it makes us feel isolated from other people. And the sense of isolation and separation that can occur when we judge ourselves or when we're in pain is really damning, because not only are we suffering, we feel all alone in our suffering, and it makes it a lot worse. And so, compassion entails, first of all, just remembering that everyone suffers and, we're not in this alone.
Yeah.
And then it also entails the wisdom of understanding common humanity as well. In other words, there's a way which, when we understand that we aren't alone, we're also understanding that we're all interconnected, right?
Mm.
So for instance, in a way, how I treat you, if I have compassion for you, also impacts me,
Mm.
because if we're in a relationship or we're part of the same whole, then what I aim outward also affects me inward, right?
Yeah,
And so it's really the wisdom element of self-compassion, this sense of common humanity, recognizing that we're all interconnected. And in many ways, this division between self and other, you think about it, why would I give compassion to you and not to me? Because that kind of, it sets up a false sense of separation, which actually isn't reality. We're all in this together. We're all interconnected.
Thank you for that. It's very rich, lots of juice in all those thoughts. And just while you're talking, I was thinking, you said we're all in this together and we're all so interconnected. And my sense is that when we act with compassion towards others, let's say, it just seems to feel good. It kind of warms us. It kind of, well, I just want to do more. I think this whole desire to give and connect is just profound. And so it seems like something that should be easy because we just love it and we enjoy it. And yet somehow we don't. We find a way to break it or to filter it. It's kind of too bad that we do that.
If you look at evolution, I mean, Paul Gilbert calls it an evolved capacity, the capacity for compassion. In other words, the brain, if you look at a brain on compassion, the reward centers of the brain get activated. And if you, again, through evolution, one of the reasons as mammals who develop very, very slowly, it takes 25 to 30 years before the prefrontal cortex fully develops, in order to create a system that would lead, parents to be willing to take care of their kids that long and the infants to stay close and safe next to the parents. We had to build a very strong attachment system, right? So feelings of compassion and care were really essential to survival of the species. And so it's a natural capacity, not only compassion, but also empathy, which is slightly different. Compassion is caring about others' suffering. Empathy is simply the ability to feel the emotions of others, positive or negative. But, our brains are designed, we have mirror neurons whose whole function it is to feel what other people are feeling. So again, that's why it's such an illusion to think of us as separate, because your emotions impact me and my emotions impact you. So if you're suffering, I'm suffering, and if I'm suffering, you're suffering, just by the resonance of our mirror neurons.
Right.
Which is another way that evolutionarily, Darwin he said like once, as a throwaway line, survival of the fittest, in his tome, the origin of species. He talked about survival of the most cooperative.
Yeah.
And so that's built into our brain, it's built into our DNA, the ability to resonate, the ability to function together in groups. And so compassion really, in many ways, is our natural state of being. But other things get in the way, as you say, we're really busy doing other stuff. We aren't always in this, we don't always recognize this aspect of our being. But it's not foreign. It's not like something we've got to aspire to develop. Already by about 2 years old, children are naturally enjoying helping and giving. It's part of our nature.
I mean, that really resonates with me. I believe it's part of our nature. It's our natural state, as you said. But having said that, I think it can be developed as a skill set or as capacities like anything else, the ability to balance or to walk or whatever. If you can practice it with intention, you can increase your capacity, so to speak.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you might say the potential is inborn in us, but to realize that potential, we do have to exercise it. Just like learning to walk, or as you say. And if we don't spend any time paying attention to it, if all our time is spent, I don't know, with our phones or working or accumulating wealth, then we aren't even aware, like that muscle just atrophies.